You're
Not
good.
ready yet?
You're good.
All right. So, that's right. You should have been ready. So,
Get that little cutie.
this morning we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 2. 1 Kings chapter 2. Again, I was trying to find out how to
Share your Bible.
if I had
Sir,
maybe could
I might need to share your
trick
Bible.
Brother Frank into telling me where he thought we were, but he knew, so it's a good thing. So anyway, 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 1 right there, we're going to see, we're going to start finding out what David's instructions are going to be to Solomon. So,
Kill him.
so we're going to start right there. It says, now the days of David drew near that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn, that the Lord may fulfill his word, which he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons take heed to their way, to walk before me in the truth with all their heart and with all their soul, he said, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. Excuse me. I'm going to stop for a minute right there. What does that sound like? Does that sound familiar? To walk in the Lord with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, right? It sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Sounds to me like a quid quo pro.
Yeah, absolutely. Verse 5. Excuse me, verse 5. Moreover, you know also what Joab the son of Zeruiah did to me, and what he did to the two commanders of the armies of Israel, to Abner the son of Ner, and Amasa the son of Jether, whom he killed. And he shed the blood of war in peacetime, and put the blood of war on his belt that was around his waist, and on his sandals that were on his feet. Therefore be according to your wisdom, and do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. But show kindness to the sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table, for so they came to me when I fled from Absalom your brother. And see, you have with you Shimei the son of Gera, a Benjamite from Baram, who cursed me with a malicious curse in the day when I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to meet me in the Jordan, and I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now, therefore, do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man, and know what you ought to do to him. But bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood. So David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The period that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. Then Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his kingdom was firmly established. Now Adoniah the son of Haggith came to Bathsheba the mother of Solomon. So she said, do you come peaceably? And he said, peaceably. Moreover, he said, I have something to say to you. And she said, say it. Then he said, you know that the kingdom was mine, and all Israel had set their expectations on me that I should reign. However, the kingdom has been turned over and has become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. Now I ask one petition of you, do not deny me. And she said to him, say it. Then he said, please speak to the king Solomon, for he will not refuse you, that he may give me Abishag the Shemonite as wife. So Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak for you to the king." Bathsheba therefore went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adoniah. And the king rose up to meet her and bowed down to her feet and sat down on his throne and had a throne set for the king's mother. So she sat at his right hand. Then she said, "I desire one small petition of you. Do not refuse me." And the king said to her, "Ask it, my mother, for I will not refuse you." So she said, "Let Abishag the Shumanite be given to Adoniah your brother as wife." And the king Solomon answered and said to his mother, "Now why do you ask Abishag the Shumanite for Adoniah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he is my older brother. For him and for Abiathar the priest and for Joab the son of Zeruiah." Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, "May God do so to me, and more also, if Adoniah has not spoken this word against his own life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has confirmed me and set me on the throne of David my father, and who has established a house for me, as he promised, Adoniah shall be put to death today." So King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down, and he died. Verse 26. And to Abiathar the priest, the king said, "Go to Anathoth." Is that right, Brother Rick? Anathoth.
Close enough.
Yeah, to your own fields, for you are deserving of death. But I will not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of the Lord God before my father David, and because you were afflicted every time my father was afflicted. So Solomon removed Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord which he spoke concerning the house of Eli at Shiloh. Then news came to Joab, for Joab had defected to Adoniah, though he had not defected to Absalom. So Joab fled to the tabernacle of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. And King Solomon was told, "Joab has fled to the tabernacle of the Lord. There he is by the altar." Then Solomon said to Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, saying, "Go, strike him down." So Benaiah went to the tabernacle of the Lord and said to him, "Thus says the king, come out." And he said, "No, but I will die here." And Benaiah brought back word to the king, saying, "Thus said Joab, and thus he answered me." Then the king said to him, "Do as he has said, and strike him down and bury him, that you may take away from me and from the house of my father the innocent blood which Joab shed. So the Lord will return his blood on his head, because he struck down two men more righteous and better than he, and killed them with the sword, Abner the son of Ner, the commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa the son of Jether, the commander of the army of Judah, though my father David did not know it. Their blood shall therefore return upon the head of Joab and upon the head of his descendants forever. But upon David and his descendants, upon his house and his throne, there shall be peace forever from the Lord." So Benaiah the son of Jehoiada went up and struck and killed him, and he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. The king put Benaiah the son of Jehoiada in his place over the army, and the king put Zadok the priest in the place of Abiathar. Verse 36. Then the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and dwell there, and do not come out from there anywhere. For it shall be on the day you go out and cross the brook Kidron, now know for certain you shall surely die. Your blood shall be on your own head." And Shimei said to the king, "This saying is good. as my lord the king has said, so your servant will do. So Shimei dwelt in Jerusalem many days, and it happened at the end of 3 years that 2 slaves of Shimei ran away to Achish, the son of Micah, king of Gath, and they told Shimei, saying, look, your slaves are in Gath. So Shimei arose, saddled his donkey, and went to Achish at Gath to seek his slaves. And Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. And Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had come back. Then the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you, saying, know for certain that on the day you go out and travel anywhere you shall surely die? And you said to me, the word I have heard is good. Why then have you kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment that I gave you? And the king said moreover to Shimei, you know, as your heart acknowledges all the wickedness that you did to my father David. Therefore the Lord will return your wickedness on your own head, but King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. So the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. Thus the kingdom was established in the hands of Solomon. Wow, a lot of information, a lot of folks not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and a lot of folks dying, right? So we see here, excuse me, a lot of information built on the instructions that King David gave his son Solomon on how he should rule and stuff, right? Wisdom that had been, acknowledged over the many years, the 40 years that David had been the king over Israel, and has, I guess Solomon had, from birth seen this and acknowledged the fact and took heed that the words that his father was telling him were wise words. And of course, the Lord, David actually backed up this by saying to Solomon prior to him passing that he was a wise man, to use his own judgment, that he was a wise man and that put God first. We see here in the final acts of King David, where David exhorts to Solomon, what he should do, the things that he should take heed and acknowledge that might happen, and if they do, the fulfillment of what should happen. It says, I go away to all the earth. David's son of Jesse, Israel's greatest king, apart from the Messiah, recognized that he was but a man and shared the common destiny of all the earth. Knowing he would soon pass from this life, David gave a final charge to Solomon. And he expanded the account of David's charge to Solomon in 1 Chronicles chapter 28. 1 Chronicles 28:29 is especially emphasizing Solomon's duties to build the temple. He told him to be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man, didn't he? He also backed it up, like I said, by saying that, hey, you're a wise man, but be strong and therefore prove yourself a man. In other words, don't be a weak king, right?
That's right.
Don't be a weak king, It says, perhaps David sensed some weakness in Solomon. Perhaps he knew Solomon would be tested in far greater ways than before. Whatever the exact reason was, David knew Solomon needed strength and courage. And so he told him to prove himself a man. Great responsibilities require great strength and courage. And that's still something that we acknowledge today as leaders. It takes strength and it takes courage to do some of the things that we do. Especially as Christians out there walking in the darkness all the time against the principalities, that we walk against. It says, this was when I read this part of the commentation, I was like, it got me to thinking. I was like, wow, even though David didn't see his sons that often, he still sensed, by talking to Solomon, what a man Solomon was going to be, and noted that he needed encouragement. You know, and that, you know, any one of us that's had children, you know, male or female, we know when they need that pat on the back. We know when they need that encouragement. We know when they need that discipline. We just happen to see it, and you know, and we fulfill it. You know, like, hey, it's going to be all right. Everything's going to be fine. You know, you're doing good. You know, this is, you know, some of the things that I've had to go through. Your mom had to go through. You know, we know here that he said to keep the charge of the Lord your God. Says David also knew that Solomon could not be strong or courageous without obedient fellowship with God. In this place of obedient fellowship, Solomon would prosper in all that he did. It says David had a general reason to exhort Solomon into obedience, but he also had a specific reason, a specific promise of God. God promised David that as long as his sons walked in obedience, they would keep the throne of Israel. You know, so this we see, you know, David as he's starting to get ready to pass on, and he's acknowledging the fact that, you know, hey, it's my time. But he wanted to make sure that he said that first. We see this where he says, hey, you know, he says, as I go away to the earth, be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man. And the next thing he said was what? And keep the charge of the Lord your God. You know, keep, that means, you know, it's something that he holds dear to him. Make sure that it happens. He says, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, his commandments, his judgments, his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn. Why do you think that David was able to give this type of encouragement to Solomon?
Because David knew firsthand, as long as you followed what the Lord did, then he was going to see you through it.
Absolutely.
And what if you didn't? What happened?
That's right. David knew both sides of the coin. He knew that there was times whenever he followed God's rule, God's ways, God's statutes, and everything was smooth for him, and God took care of him.
That's right.
You know? But then also, what happened when David... right, when David denied the obedience of the Father.
Almost to death.
Yes, absolutely. You know, so he was able to give this advice on dealing with not only his friends, but his enemies as well, right? We see that. It says in 5 through 9, it says, do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace. You know, David wanted Solomon to begin his reign in justice and to first give justice to Joab, who was guilty of murder of both Abner, the general of the Israel army under Saul, and Amasa, one of David's military commanders. Joab is one of the more complex characters of the Old Testament. It says he was fiercely loyal to David, yet not strongly obedient. He disobeyed David when he thought it was in David's best interest, and was cunning and ruthless in furthering his own position. And we saw that many times. Billy acknowledged the fact that we did read that, where, you know, he made decisions behind David's back, you know, that he thought were in David's best interest. But there again, it furthered him. He thought it was going to further him in his political position, being general, you know. But he also said not only that, but he gave him, encouragement and guidance on showing kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, right, and Shimei. It said David also wanted Solomon to do justice by these who had helped David in a time of great need. It says to eat at the king's table was the equivalent of having a pension. the beneficiary receiving a regular royal allowance of food and clothing with a house and land to support him and his family. He also said, David vowed that he would not kill the obnoxious rebel Shimei. It was right for David to keep his vow, but it was also right for him to make sure that Shimei received justice without David breaking his vow. Now, do you guys see a
Pattern?
do you see a pattern here where David might have learned something from not penalizing or not punishing his sons to what he's doing to these men? Do y'all see any resemblance there? Because we see that David was too busy with doing king stuff that he didn't do very much
Focus on anything
punishment
on the other end.
on his sons, right?
So.
But on these military men, what did he do? He was strict.
Very strict, yeah.
He was very strict. Very, followed the letter to the T, the T to the letter, or whatever you want to call it. It says, David rested with the fathers. The phrase will become common throughout 1st and 2nd Kings to describe the passing of the king from this world. It says, truly, David passed from this life to eternal rest and reward. We know that he was buried in the city of David. The tomb of David was known in the time of Jesus and the apostles, according to Acts chapter 2, verse 29, which says, men and brethren, let me speak freely to you of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. Afterwards, the Christian writer Jerome speaks of it being known in his time. Says, what is currently known in Jerusalem as David's tomb is almost certainly not the genuine one that was known in the ancient times. So,
Because Jerusalem was destroyed.
yes.
Yes.
Yes. It says, Solomon sat on the throne of his father, and his kingdom was firmly established. Says this is the phrase to show that it was the fulfillment of the promise made to David in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 through 16. That promise was ultimately fulfilled in Jesus, the son of David, but it also had a definite and partial fulfillment in Solomon. It says, with Solomon began, in some senses, the most splendid period in Israel's history. The splendor, however, was largely mental and material. The spiritual is noticeably absent because we know what kind of King Solomon became,
Started out in glory, ended in
Shame.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
and
So,
his son. You can tell that Solomon, in all his wisdom, didn't pass
that down.
down.
Quite,
Right.
yeah.
Right, absolutely. We see here on Solomon secures his throne, and in verse 13 through 18, Adoniah asked Bathsheba to make appeal on his behalf. So what did Adoniah do? He was the son of Agatha. What did Adoniah do?
Well, he thought that if he went to Bathsheba instead of to Solomon himself, then he wouldn't deny his mom, and he'd get what he wanted, and he'd be okay.
Right. Yeah, that he would prosper in some way, form, or fashion. Right. Very good answer, Jackie. It says, now Adoniah, the son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, and he said, and she said, do you come peaceably? Why did she say that?
Because she knew that he was actually the one next in line.
Right, absolutely. And she thought that he might have some, animosity towards Solomon, who became king because of...
her too.
Yeah, exactly, because she was the one that brought it up to David, right? Okay. So it says, I have something to say to you, and she said, say it. But he asked, I lost my place here. I'm sorry, guys.
Do not refuse me.
Yeah, do not refuse me. It says, you know that the kingdom was mine, and all Israel had set their expectations on me that I should reign. However, the kingdom was turned over and has become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. So do you think that Ananias recognized that? Because he said that, do you think Ananias recognized the fact that it wasn't his it was his by probably, the recognition of coming from son to son to son, or do you think that he recognized finally by saying that it wasn't his because the Lord made sure that Solomon became king?
I think he just said it to save his bacon.
Exactly right. But
I
at the
think
same
he
time,
just said that to get what he wanted out of
at the
Bathsheba.
same time,
Absolutely,
Ananias-
because of the way Ananias was. It was the same way Absalom was,
at the same time, there's
and
a
the way
consequence
they-
for what punishment comes. He knew that too. I have a feeling he knew that in his brain, but he tried to twist it enough, to
right, so that he could get what he wanted,
Yeah.
So it says Ananias seemed to suffer from delusion of grandeur. He imagined that there was widespread popularity to support him as king. In reality, he had a handful of influential people to support him, and they quickly deserted him when it was evident that David favored Solomon as king.
Oh, how the tide turned.
What's that?
Oh, how the tide turned.
The tide turned really quick, didn't it? So, so what happened? So Bathsheba, she did what she promised, right? She brought it to Solomon, right? And what did Solomon say? Mary was like, huh. Solomon had a different way of thinking, didn't he?
This is wrong. No, we ain't.
Absolutely. So.
Like he saw through the whole thing.
Yep. Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that you kind of feel like the wisdom that David was talking about that Solomon had kind of shone through, didn't it? Absolutely. So
He said I was born, but it wasn't last night.
yeah, he said I might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night, right? So Solomon said to Bathsheba, what did he say? He said, ask for him the kingdom also. Solomon understood the situation perfectly. He knew that this was Ananias' attempt to declare or build a claim to the throne of Israel. So again, it's like Jackie and Mary and them and Brother Terry said, he saw through that smoke screen really quick. And he knew that this was Ananias' way of trying to build a case in order to get the throne from him. And what was one of David's things that he told to Solomon to beware of? Yeah. So that's just, it looks like that's basically what that he saw. It says, as the Lord lives, he who has confirmed me and set me on the throne of my father, David my father. Solomon was zealous to give justice to Ananias because he knew that God gave him the throne of Israel. So Solomon simply acted according to the terms of parole on Ananias' behalf. It says, that he granted terms of parole granted to Ananias in 1 Kings chapter 1 verse 52. It says, if he proves himself a worthy man, not one hair of him shall fall to the earth, but if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. Ananias made a wicked, treasonous request and is executed because of it. So King Solomon was doing exactly what he said he would do. He promised that as long as Ananias didn't make a move for the throne, he'd be fine. But when Ananias made this request to Bathsheba,
Broke rule number 2.
yeah. So he knew again right then that it was a smoke screen and that he was trying to make a bid for his throne.
But is there some reason why he wanted that specific?
Because
She was King
David's-
David's last wife,
Yeah,
but she remained a virgin.
yes. Because all she did was like keep him warm and take care of him, take care of him.
Like a
A maid, like a nurse, maid, yeah.
And if he could marry her, combined with the fact that he was the eldest,
Yeah.
between that and marrying the last wife of King David, he would have a stronger
Case.
case
more
to the
purpose.
throne of David if he could get
The 12 tribes.
those behind him, people behind him, he
Okay.
could have a civil war.
He was trying to get a toe in the door.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
more of a toe in the door. He
Yeah.
already had a toe in the door.
Yeah.
Because
So-
he did have legal right to the throne,
So he was, because he was firstborn.
Right.
which shows you God often goes around the laws he set forth.
Absolutely. And we also see that that Abiathar was exiled, right? Abiathar was exiled. It says, "And to Abiathar the priest, the king said, Go to Anathoth to your own fields, for you are deserving of death. But I will not put you to death at this time, because you carried the ark of the Lord God before my father David, and because you were afflicted every time my father was afflicted." So Solomon removed Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord, which he spoke concerning the house of Eli at Shiloh. So Abiathar deserved death because he supported Ananiah as the next king in defiance of the will of God and the will of King David. This was treason against both God and the king of Israel. So Solomon knew that he was deserving, and even Abiathar knew he was deserving of death. Because we know that Abiathar said what? This is good. He knew that that he was deserving of to be put to death then. So it says, Solomon showed mercy and wisdom to Abiathar. Mercy was shown in sparing Abiathar's life in the light of his past standings as a chief priest and supporter of David. Wisdom was shown in exiling him and saying, I will not put you to death at this time. So Solomon let Abiathar know that he could still be executed if he didn't follow instructions given to him. And as we see, he did not. And so,
He also fulfilled the word of the Lord.
yes, absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
Bible says you will not face death now.
Right, absolutely.
But,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that in the future, you are still saved.
That's it.
Writing on the wall.
Right. And we also see Joab wound up getting executed, right? And verses 28 through 35, we see that Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, went up and struck and killed him, right? So I had mentioned this before, where he said that Joab had taken the horns of the altar. It says Joab supported Ananiah in his treasonous attempt to gain David's throne. Now he imitated Ananiah's attempt to find refuge by taking hold of the horns of the altar, as Ananiah did in 1 Kings chapter 1, verse 50 through 53. We saw that. But that didn't fly with King Solomon, did it? No. King Solomon said, do what? Yeah, Benaniah, go and strike him down. So although it was
be that much closer to the Lord when he goes.
That's right. It says, although it was almost a universal custom in the ancient world to find sanctuary at a holy altar, Solomon knew that this ancient custom was not used in Israel to protect a guilty man. But if a man acts with premeditation against his neighbor to kill him by treachery, you shall take him from my altar, and he may die. And that's Exodus chapter 21, verse 14. So since Joab refused to leave, Solomon had him executed right at the altar. Because, Benaniah had told him to come out, and what did he say? Nope, not going to do it. Not going to do it. And Solomon also settled the past with Shimei as well, right? I know I'm trying to move through this a little bit quick so that we can get
Well,
through
he
it.
gave him an out too. He
did.
spent the rest of his life in his house and he really never left. And then he
Left.
And then he left. He again,
made his own choice.
he made his own choice and he disobeyed what Solomon had instructed him to do.
He also disobeyed, because he swore an oath to the Lord.
Lord, that's right.
He disobeyed the king
And the Lord, that's right. So we see here that Shimei had said that what? After King Solomon told him, all right, you go, you stay there, don't go out. You know, if you stay there, you'll be fine. If not, then you're going to die. You'll surely die. And Shimei said, what? That's good. It's good. You know, I'll do that. But what happened?
He forgot.
3 years later, just 3 years later, I'm sorry, but if the king tells me that I'm going to die if I leave there, I will die in that little town.
I think he's telling everybody to forget.
I think he, absolutely, he probably did, Mary.
At a time.
Really tired.
Went by.
Yeah, 3 years,
King's no
good.
longer mad.
yeah, king's no longer mad. He
Yes,
won't-
think
he
about it.
thought the slaves were more worthy than his own life.
Absolutely. You know, that's something too. It was saying that Shimei was associated with the household of the former king Saul and showed himself as a threat to the house of David. David instructed Solomon not to allow Shimei to die in peace. And Solomon began dealing with Shimei by placing him under what? House arrest.
Yes.
Right? He said this thing is good. Shimei knew that Solomon was merciful and generous to him. He not only agreed with the arrangement, but he was also grateful for it. Solomon extended mercy to Shimei, but Shimei abused it and took advantage of it. It seems to have been mainly a matter of neglect or forgetfulness, but it was criminal to neglect or forget a royal covenant. You know, so again, like you guys were saying, Mary was saying that maybe he had just forgot, you know, and that the king wouldn't worry about it because he wasn't mad no more. Yeah,
Let his emotions get the better of him.
absolutely.
No knowledge of the law is still a crime.
Absolutely, because the king's rule is the king's command is his command, you know. It says, thus the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. It says this chapter demonstrates that Solomon's throne was secure at an early date, not like the reign of David or Saul. It says the initial demonstration of justice was important for Solomon to perform. He seems to think that while such bad men remained unpunished, the nation would or could not prosper. That it was an act of justice which God required him to perform in order to the establishment and the perpetuity of his throne. In other words, the security of his throne. Says it is interesting to compare his position now with that of his two predecessors, Saul and David, at the start of their reigns. Both had faced a measure of opposition from their own countrymen. Both had met this problem with resolute actions, coupled with understanding and leniency. Solomon, however, eliminated his potential enemies swiftly and ruthlessly. Says, oh, that this is said by Trapp. It says, oh, that we would be as quick in slaying our arch rebels, those predominant sins that threaten our precious souls. In other words, if we would, threaten our sins like we do our enemies, that we'd be fine. It might be good to go. But anybody got any questions on 1 Kings chapter 2 about the instructions that David gave Solomon and how Solomon dealt with these three men?
Solomon pretty much let them hang in themselves,
Yep.
or let them cause the death penalty to come on themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. He was like David said, he used wisdom and he allowed them, he gave them just enough rope for them to hang themselves, like you said. He showed mercy and therefore in the eyes of the people, showed that he was a wise and merciful king. And therefore, when you have kings like that, setting commands and guidelines and stuff like that for the rest of the community that's around them, then they support him. And he knew he was going to get that. And he knew if he disciplined them, according to his commands or his words, then also they would respect him as king as well for his authority. Anybody else? It's a pretty good chapter. I like that.
Well, is Solomon setting himself up like David did when, as long as he was leading, he was out there with the men soldiers, and he was leading, everything went hunky-dory. But when he decided to stay back and send the army out to do, it started falling apart. So Solomon is sending all these things, people out to do these things. Is he starting to set himself up for a fall?
Solomon's fall was the fact that he made too many treaties with foreign dignitaries and accepted their daughters as
Wives.
the
Concubines or whatever.
the agreement between the countries was sealed with a wife. She was both reverenced and held in case the other country broke their promises. She was a political prisoner.
Yeah.
And he had great many, and then that wasn't enough, so he took more.
And we're gonna get into that here shortly. So,
But most of them were from sealing of covenants between
other
different countries.
Yeah.
I would have liked to live them because it said that silver was as common as stones.
Yeah.
So I would have liked to gone up and gathered lots of their stones.
Anyone else before we close? No? Good, very good lesson this morning. Brother Frank, will you close us in a word of prayer, sir?
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you again, Lord. Thank you for this day and these
Yes, Lord.
lessons, Lord. We thank you for this lesson that's been brought. I ask that you put your hand upon the spoken and the spoken prayer requests, Lord. Just be with the psalm service and the preaching
Yes.
that's going into that for us, Lord. Just keep us safe as we go our separate ways and bring us back to point of God. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.